Okay, today I'm going to show you. Now you have your snow globe completed. You have outlined it in Sharpie. It does need to be waterproof marker so that it doesn't bleed when you do the watercolor part. So the technique that I want you to incorporate with your watercolor is the wet and wet technique. Okay, so we're going to be painting the wet and wet around whatever figure that you have. It is best to work in smaller sections when you do this technique because you need it to stay wet for it to work. You also need to think about your color scheme, okay? So when we're looking at the color wheel, we have cool colors and we have warm colors. So you need to pick one half or the other. Do not mix the two, because when you mix the two, your complementary colors, so said you did want red and green and you want a little bit in the background, you're going to end up with different browns, and you probably don't want that for your snow globe. So you need to stick with cool colors or the warm color family, and so that it can mix and blend and still look really nice. So for wet on wet technique, make sure your watercolors are nice and moist. Okay, I've dropped some water in them already, so they're soaking into the color. And I am going to use the cool color scheme. And wet and wet just means you are going to pick a section. So I'm going to work in this smaller section, and I am just literally going to paint water on the paper. I do not want any water on the snow for now, and I don't want it in my figure. So I paint this little section, and then I'm going to take the color and I'm going to just, you can mix any of those color families in there. Remember, the purple, if you're working in class, purple comes out pretty intense, so make sure that you water that down. Remember, true watercolor means that you have transparent effect. You should not have sticky, gooey paint. So I put there's a little too much of this purple, a little too much intensity, so I'm going to lighten that up a little bit. Okay, and then I want to make sure my brush is nice and clean so I can get nice clean water and do another section. If you're having trouble seeing where you have the water, you'll need to keep section by section, keep this wet so it does get blended and you don't have these harsh like lines. So maybe I do some of this. Maybe I do a little bit of green. So now I'm getting some hints of blue-green as well. So if you're having trouble seeing, you can get your head bent to the side and at an angle, and you'll see that reflection. So you're just going to, and that's a little tainted, that's okay. It is super important that you make sure and keep your edges wet when you're doing this technique, so you have nice blending. So you're just painting in a section while it's still wet and letting the blending work for you. Got a brush hair in there. Kind of like the way that looks. I might just leave that alone. Kind of looks like snowflakes. That part's dry, but that's okay. You can just blend that out a little bit. All right, so you can continue working on that. And this is just a highlight, but I'm gonna maybe add a little bit of color there. Now my tree is a little bit complicated, so I might just do a couple of the sections and then move on. Just a little A little dab will do ya. Again, let it mix, let it blend. That's what this technique is for. You can add as much color, make it as intense as you want. If you want it really like translucent, you can do that. I haven't gone over those areas yet. And those parts were dry. I want them a little more solid, so it's fine. Alright. So I got pretty much my background. Now, you should be doing this the last, I don't know, 15-20 minutes of class so that, I mean, once you do this part, you can't do anything until it dries. Like, you can't do any of the other coloring until it's dry. So save this part for the last little portion of class, let it dry a day, and then you can come back to it. So wet on wet has a tendency to have that, you know, tie-dye looking effect. It's a very abstract kind of detailing. It does not, can't be very picky with it. All right. If you get a little too much pigment on it and you don't like it, just get a wet brush or a dry brush even and pick up some of that pigment. Make sure you have a paper towel with you when you're working with watercolor. See, I'm lightening this up. It's a little too dark for my taste. All right, I think I'm happy with that. So I'm gonna put that on the drying rack and then I'll come back with color pencil and add my details the next day. For the bottom portion of your snow globe, you do not have to do the wet on wet technique. You can just paint it however you want. I will suggest that you do, if you want it to look more three-dimensional, do a little bit of value, maybe throw in some other color. It does not have to be brown. You can do value with other things. So with watercolor, making a tint is just adding more water, making a lighter version. The white is your paper. And if you needed to make something a little bit darker, use it itsy bitsy tiny amount of black, because a little bit goes a long way. Or you can do like what I've done here and have your brown and mix in some warm colors to warm it up a little bit, or you can do some cool colors. But I use the contrasting. I added some oranges and some reds in here so that it would contrast with my cool colors in my snow globe.